Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paula Gangopadhyay, Deputy Director in the Office of Museum Services at IMLS, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you today to this session entitled Museums and Libraries as Community Responders in Times of Crises. I hope all of you are staying safe and healthy. We do have a dynamic panel with museum and library representatives here today. But before we begin the panel and the slide deck that I have for you, I want to sort of share a personal recollection. It seems like only yesterday, but I know that it was a few years ago when I made my opening remarks at the inaugural Capitol Hill Maker Faire. It was a few years ago. And I distinctly remember that day. It was in early June. Because I had just, wrapped up. I was a part of the huge team at the Henry Ford in Michigan at that time, and we had wrapped up the first large Maker Faire outside the Bay Area, that year. So I was coming from this phenomenal experience, and I mentioned this incident at the onset as a context because over these past few years, I have personally seen the evolution of the maker movement in both informal and formal learning spaces. I have seen up close and personal like the impact it has made on youth, how it has triggered interest in their minds to be curious, to aspire to be the next generation of innovators and inventors. And lastly, but most importantly, in my current role, I have seen a huge evolution in the role of museums and libraries in terms of their capacity in offering some stellar and meaningful maker experiences to the audiences that they serve. So I want to begin without any further, without any further loss of time. I want to begin today's session, and I want to have a quick slideshow that I would like to share with you. So that we can share what IMLS as a federal funding agency has been doing to support making in museums and libraries. Next. So IMLS, as many of you know, is the primary source of federal support for the nation's libraries and museums. We award approximately $252 million every year through grants to museums, libraries, colleges, universities, organizations that serve museums, federally recognized Native American tribes, and organizations that serve Native Hawaiians. And making falls under the category of learning, offering lifelong learning experiences. So it's a very, very wonderful fit with our strategic plan goals. Next. So IMLS has been, like I mentioned, has invested more than $10 million in learning through making in museums and libraries. And if you really look at what types of activities we have funded in under the broad umbrella of making, it is basically 4 key areas. One is to support a variety of learning spaces in libraries and museums that foster innovation and experimentation through design thinking and project-based learning for people of all ages. And museums and libraries have always been about experiential learning. So again, making just helps it, takes it further. And as you go into museums and libraries, it's heartwarming for us to see the small logo of IMLS, which says funding to, for this space has been provided in part by IMLS. So that really makes us really happy. We have also invested in advancing research and promising practices for makerspaces that benefits the entire sector. We have invested a lot in building the capacity of museum and library professionals through appropriate training and skill building, whether it is STEM, STEAM, 3D printing. We always want to make sure that our professionals, the library and museum staff and volunteers, are at the cutting edge of these technologies. So we have provided a lot of training, funding. Oops, sorry. I think I lost my I don't know what happened. Sorry, I hope you didn't miss me. And then last but not the least, the maker movement and our investment has really made, has helped museums and libraries expand the cross-sector partnerships between museums, libraries, and the whole world of makers. So we can go to the next slide. One particular example that I wanted to mention to you very briefly is what I call a collective impact project example on STEM and making. And this is a very large, large is a relative term. It's a pretty large initiative between the Department of Education and IMLS. It's a $1.9 million, project that is going on this year. And we are in the 6th year of this project. And as you can see on this chart, it's a complex multi-layered partnership that starts from 2 federal agencies coming together. And then we are partnering, or IMLS is partnering with NYSCI, or the New York Hall of Science, who's then partnering with 7 museums all across the nation who are training the 21st century learning centers, train the trainers. They are training or empowering the after-school providers in offering the STEM and making experiences, to underserved youth. This year, the project aims to reach up to 1,000 students all across the nation. And before COVID hit, we had already exceeded our midpoint or mid-year goal and have impacted more than 700 students already. So we can go on to the next slide here. And here is a quick snapshot of the Children's Museum and Science Museums who are collaborators with us on this project. Some of our panelists, that you will hear today represent some of these wonderful institutions. And the next slide gives you a very quick geographic view. If we can go to the next slide. Gives you a geographic view of where these institutions are located. And the geographic location is not by chance. We are very strategic in our conversations. The whole initiative started 6 years ago, mostly focused in the eastern part of the country. But then as we expanded and added museums, we were very proactive in reaching out to remote, rural, and some of the hard to reach states. Next slide. And as they say, seeing is believing. Here is me right before COVID, end of February, I made a visit to the Children's Museum of Houston and visited one of the schools to see some of the children, participating in this project. And it was just wonderful. The excitement, the problem solving that was going on. And Jason, of course, does a phenomenal job of being that museum educator, who really will make a difference in the lives of these children. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to read this whole testimonial, but the CCLC, or the 21st Century Community Learning Site directors, are very appreciative of this partnership with the museums. And as they say, that it will be an experience that the students will cherish, forever. So that's sort of a very brief overview that I wanted to give of one large project that we are doing. There are multiple others that IMLS has funded. Most of the products, the curriculum from this project is available on the Department of Education's Y2Y website. Any product that gets funded with federal funding is free and available for you to use. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. They are available for you to reuse even now as you are scrambling for resources. If you go to the IMLS website, there's a wonderful publication that was created a few years ago by the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And there are about, I think, 18 libraries and equal number of museums that participated in it. So there are wonderful case studies in that publication. There's a framework that you can use, and there are tips and tools of what has already been tested. So these are the resources that we always like to highlight, for any of you to use with the work that you are doing. So let's now move on to the next slide and to the bulk of our presentation today. And on the topic, how museums and libraries are responding as community responders in the time of crises. I am extremely pleased and very thankful to the 4 panelists that we have here, and we'll be asking them to introduce themselves very soon. If we can go on to the next slide, here's a snapshot of who they are. So let's begin with a round of introductions. Would you please just say your name, the organization you're from, and anything that you can fit in your 1 minute during this segment? Sam, we can start with you.
Okay, 1 minute and counting. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Dean. I'm the founding executive director of the Scott Family Amazeum. We're a 55,000 square foot children's museum science center makerspace located in Bentonville, Arkansas. AR is for Arkansas. That's the one thing I want everyone to remember. It's AR, everyone. Arkansas. I've been in the museum field for a little over 25 years, including going to the Henry Ford Museum as I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, but been in Toledo, Fort Worth, San Francisco at the Exploratorium before moving here to start this museum. We just turned 5 years old last week. So we are 5 years old and looking forward to the, excuse me, next 105. Scientist born and raised and trained. I think that's my 60 seconds. I'll pause.
Thank you. Ash, do you want to go next?
I'm Ash. I'm the K-12 education manager at ScienceWorks Hands-On Museum in Ashland, Oregon. It's a small town in Southern Oregon. We're the only science center for about 5 hours north or south or east. And we serve a really broad and diverse population. A lot of rural schools, and we do a lot of off-site work, a lot of on-site work, and I have an eclectic background coming from lab sciences, getting into teaching children poetry, and moving into museum education from there.
Wonderful. Maria?
Hello, my name is Maria Escalante. I'm the library director at the College of Menominee Nation S. Verno Fowler Academic Library, Menominee Public Library. We are a joint tribal college and public library, and we've been making for 4 years. We started with an IMLS grant. We continued with another IMLS grant, so we started making and we added traditional artists and crafts, and it's just continues to grow from there, and it's really fun to be able to be a maker.
Okay, thank you. Last but not the least, Jason.
Sorry, I wouldn't unmute. Hi, I'm Jason Hammond. I am the ACE team manager at the Children's Museum of Houston. The ACE team just, it's just STEAM, and it is the after school manager. So I do after school programming. I've been doing museum work for coming up 26 years now, and I've worked at almost any institution you can think of. I've worked at an observatory, a natural science, history museum, a science center. And for the last 6 years, I've been here at the Children's Museum. And I really enjoy my work with these fine folks I'm doing this panel with.
Wonderful. And Jason, I think the Children's Museum of Houston has been one of the inaugural partners on this particular project. So you've been involved for, from the beginning, right?
We have been here. We've been doing it all the rounds. Yep.
Right.
So.
Right. Thank you so much. So again, as we know, mid-March when the pandemic hit, and all of us had to really adjust to the shock and sort of pivot, our roles. And we were doing this, and when I say we, I'm saying, we meaning museums and libraries. We were doing this while we were facing almost like existential challenge, ourselves. Because what many people may not know, that museums, heavily, some of the libraries are free, but museums heavily depend on gated admission and programming revenue or earned revenues, and that sort of stopped abruptly. Many of you have had to furlough or lay off staff and operate on continuing your mission. So first of all, I want to begin with a huge hats off to you for the show of resilience and for your commitment to serving, the audiences that you serve. And I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Let's take a few minutes, and this time, Sam, I'm going to give maybe 3 to 4 minutes for you all to share Briefly tell us how you are operating in this community responder role in the last couple of months. And I would also like to hear whether you are proactively doing this or you are responding to a need that has been where you have been asked to step in. You know, somebody else in the community has asked you to step in and help in a certain kind of role. So again, Sam, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. Existential crisis is it's still ongoing, and it's so acute. It's you know, we're faced, what do you do when you rely on your best learning prop being a 50,000 square foot facility that requires half of the money coming from people coming to the facility? What do you do at that moment? And I think, you know, we had a choice early on in how we could invest. And we were fortunate to be able to our pivot was, can we get enough funding sustainability to not just survive, but we made the decision to not hunker down. What happened if we go a bit supernova, right? What if we can't be on our campus? What if we are all around the community in whatever way we can? We knew we were being asked that by our parents, by community members, by school districts, by other folks who are all wondering, what do I do when my kid's at home all the time? And they actually had that plaintive voice as well, right? It was like, what do I do? I'm not used to seeing my child this much in the midst of all these unknown pieces. So a couple of things that just the Amazium really thought about. Number one, we knew parents were overloaded with a lot of resources coming in. So and they were just looking for one thing to do every day. So we created this platform called Amazium U. So within 72 hours of shutting our doors, we created this new platform. We had no idea what it would be, but we knew we were going to start on Wednesday, and we were going to do whatever it was to start on Wednesday. So we created a platform that had curated videos, leaned on partner content, Facebook Live broadcasts. It was every piece. It was, it was the Johnny Carson show brought together at the Amazium. But it was our way to connect with our 6,000 plus members and our community to say, like, hey, today, here are a couple things you could do that won't overload you. And there are things you can find around your house, because we know you're not going to the grocery store. We know you're not leaving your house at all. So what are the likely things you might have there? We asked what was happening in our community, like what are ways we could support our broader community. So we knew our local creatives were struggling. You know, we had some funding to work with creatives, so we micro granted to a number of folks to do performances, live performances, to do commissioned art, to work on exhibits, etc. So we wanted to support the creative community. We wanted to support food insecurity efforts. So as we got around that first month, and as things started to sort of settle in that this was going to be a longer haul, not just a month-long kind of closure, we started to look for these next tree rings out, how we could support other folks. So food insecurity, we're putting together now, I think over 4 or 5,000 activity kits to go along with a local food source. In fact, we wrote the grant to be able to help provide the food for families that we were supplementing with. So we were looking for partners who were looking to kind of match up with needs in the community. Then we had to reinvent ourselves. The things that we were used to doing, camps, professional development workshops around like our Maker Boot Camp, we just had to reinvent ways that we could work with our audiences who are still looking to connect with us, but we can no longer physically do that. So again, looking for our direct family audiences, our community audiences in dialogue with community leaders, and then our regular professional and other audiences that we had to transform our platforms there.
Wonderful. A quick question, before we move on to the next panel is the micro grants that you provided to the artists. I'm fascinated with that. Did you already have funding, or did you come up with funding? If I may ask that question.
Sure. So I consider the first month, the month after we closed on March 13th was called the hustle, right? It was calling everyone, school superintendent, the new person who came on board to do granting for arts agencies. There are 2 new organizations that were starting up. So we had a little bit of money set aside to do programming on site that we rededicated out there. Frankly, I donated money to the cause because I was watching creative friends who were struggling. We had a team that donated to the cause. We had board members donate to the cause. So we were just kind of hustling to try and bring pools of money in that could be then redeployed and kind of put into play. So it was some very small things and some a little bit larger things we were able to secure.
It's very inspirational. Ash, would you like to go next and tell us what's going on in Oregon?
Yes, we also had to kind of do a quick turnaround going from being able to serve our schools locally and schools as far away as Northern California and Washington come down to our town to see the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is a world-class performing Shakespeare company that does contemporary stuff too. And they often want to come to our museum too, to do some, hands-on science. So suddenly everyone had to cancel their, visits. So we had to quickly figure out a way to still be able to continue to serve the population, supporting hands-on science when we couldn't rely on people coming to the museum and having the on-site location. So we decided we wanted to launch an online platform, kind of experimenting with facilitation remotely. So we started doing live streams and doing live maker projects where you could follow along at home and we would do the project together. We also included a write-up PDF exploration so that people could take the maker project and turn it into a deeper investigation. So it could actually branch out into a science inquiry investigation. And the other thing we started piloting was we're doing kind of a flipped classroom model. So we're pre-recording a topic. My little picture you saw was actually one of them investigating symmetry in insects. And so we'll present a phenomena to the kids that gives them their big question of why is it important for insects to be symmetrical? And then they'll do a maker project to kind of follow through that idea. The project was balancing, it was symmetry and balance. And so it turns into its own inquiry investigation. Then we do a Zoom follow-up where we interact with the kids remotely and they can ask any questions or say anything they discovered. And that's what we've done so far. We're also now branching into some more things. We were able to have kids on site for summer camps in just reduced numbers and distanced. And we're going to be offering some on-site kind of tiny cohorts in the fall where kids can come in the afternoon on the days that they're not in school. And also we're thinking of trying to do some more things around the community, like being on other sites and helping with the free lunch program.
Wonderful. And you were telling me when we were chatting earlier that you are doing all of this with a much reduced staff force. It's just you?
Now, when camp started, we were able to, we do have 2 other people who help with camps and some camp part-time instructors. But all the stuff we did this spring, yeah, I was the sole person in education and I worked with 2 other people to do the filming and get it all available to the public.
Yeah, thank you. Kudos to you. Maria, we would love to hear from you. Maria, you're muted.
I see that now. Okay, just like everybody else, 1 minute we were at work and then the next minute we were all at home. And it's like the whole community was taken by surprise. Laura Robinson is the youth librarian and Bethany Hughes is the librarian, and both of them rose to the challenge of meeting the needs of the community during the pandemic. They've done an amazing job because the week of March 16th, we also found out that in order for our programming to be counted by the state as a public library, it had to be live streamed. So it kind of kicked up everything just a bit. Laura and Bethany saw the need and they wanted to make sure that people had something where they were, which was at home. And that was the start of our venture into the online virtual world. And we've never done online programming before this. Everything was always in person. So as I'm sure you all are realizing now, Zoom has been a really good feature for a program for getting people to meet together. And we also know that Facebook Live has been helpful. We tried YouTube, but that didn't bring as many people in, so they went back to Facebook Live. We realized that with adults and children at home and no school, that families are really missing that connection. So they found ways to bring virtually all of the library programming that we used to do in person online, which I thought was amazing. I thought we'd have like one or two things, but nope, they took it all online. And so everything that we offer every month is online now. One of the things that Laura has done is she's used Zoom meetings for closed programming. So she has something for youth, teens and tweens on, it was like on a Thursday. That was now as a Zoom meeting, so it was a closed session. Other things she's done has been a Zoom meeting that she streamed live, depending on the programming. We have a partnership with artist Janice Rabidou, who works for the Menominee Tribal Social Services and their Family Preservation Department. She used the artist that would be there for the Art Underground. So that's been really helpful. So that gives another, a community partner. So it's not always the same person coming up with ideas. It really helps to have that partnership. The other thing is that the other events like our Maker Monday, Try It Tuesday, Breathe and Bead, those have all been Facebook Live. So it's really been interesting watching all of this evolve, and it's been a real big learning curve, but it's been really fun. So through all of the trials and tribulations, it's been enjoyable.
Thank you. Jason?
Hi, everybody. So we, one of the bigger proactive things that happened to us by happenstance was the program I run. We are in 155 schools and we serve about 5,000 kids a week throughout Greater Houston. And because it's such a long running program, we have about 6 years worth of supplies and storage in a public storage. And at first we were afraid, like, oh no, we're gonna be able to get into the public storage. And we were, so we were never away from our supplies. So we were able to put together, like Sam, about 5,000 kits for it's an organization called Kids Meals that we're giving out food to families all across Houston. And we were able to do it for them for free because it was just supplies that we had. So we just gathered it all up, put it together, and we were giving them all kinds of stuff, like, making helicopters, making kites, making slingshots, making all kinds of stuff like that. We continued that program until mid-June. And by that time we were, the Children's Museum is open right now. So we had to kind of like slow that down because we have to serve people now in the museum again. But at the same time, since I'm outreach, we're also, like everyone seemingly else is doing, is we did a lot of virtual camps using Zoom and whatnot. And a lot of our camps also had making elements to them. So some of the camps we would do live with them, and some of them we would do videos and train, like do the train-the-trainer model. And they would teach the kids because sometimes there was difficulty getting everyone together on our platform. So we would just train them and off they'd go. But what's been great is all the different camps we've done, the kids have been just like sending pictures to us, just boom, boom, boom. So we're seeing all the cool things they're making. In the very traditional sense of making, and also kind of like in the non-traditional sense, like they've made, like using genetics, they've made cats that all look different because they had to like find alleles and all that kind of stuff. So we try to really encourage that aspect so we can see what's going on in our community. Right now, there's actually one camp running called Camp Adventure. I did a live of that earlier today. So we do Facebook Lives as well. And coming up, I'm going to be actually teaching a Girl Scout camp for 5 days, doing science and whatnot. But other than that, it's we've done the same thing. Like we immediately put together a virtual platform where we were doing story times, and we have like a little band that was doing songs, and we were doing science. And I was one of the major science people, so we were doing a lot of different projects with the making elements and other things as well. So, I mean, I know it seems like I'm being a little redundant here because everyone else talked before me, but this is what we were doing as well. So. And now we're open and we're doing both. We're doing a virtual aspect and we're doing, like I'm going to be going to my floor for 4 hours at 4 o'clock today to teach science. So that's what's really incredible, is how we're keeping up the virtual while being open. And we've been open since the day after Memorial Day.
Maybe you touched on this, but one of the major efforts that the Children's Museum of Houston has been involved with, even before the pandemic hit, was providing these kits, right? Like thousands of kits. Do you want to speak about that? Because that, I thought, was such an altruistic, effort on behalf of the institution.
So yeah, when the pandemic hit, we just started giving out these individualized kits to families. And no expectation, like they're yours, it's enough for 4 uses, do with what you want, have fun. Before that, it was a little bit more like, we had a program and we would do these kits, but it was an absolutely free program to the kids. And every 2 weeks, we would put together 155 kits that had 2 activities in them, and that went on for 28 weeks. So they would get 28 activities, but we would build them every 14 weeks, me and a staff of 3 people. So that was lots of fun. I miss it.
Yeah, it's incredible. So thank you again for sharing, the proactive steps that you all have taken, and you really are going beyond your normal call of duty to serve the communities. So this particular situation has surely taught us not only lessons on resiliency, but it has really taught us how to jump into a situation and be the problem solvers, right? And as they say, disruptions, are challenging. They are painful, but they also offer us opportunities to go beyond our comfort zone and come up with innovative ideas. So my next question to all of you is, talk to us about one challenge and maybe an opportunity that this experience has taught you. And what are some of the lessons that you plan to take forward? Even post-pandemic, when everything becomes all right, what is that one lesson that you want to take forward, which can be educational for all our attendees as well?
Okay, should I lean in here, Paula? All right.
Yeah.
I think funding's a challenge. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to toss that aside for a second, because I think we all feel that challenge in lots of different ways. I was actually thinking, so I'm actually pivoting from the answer. I'm pivoting from the answer that I was thinking about, because I was thinking one of the biggest challenges I think I've been finding, and this is going to sound a little bit esoteric, the boundaries, right? The traditional boundaries that are drawn around communities, around organizations, around funding, around actually I find have gotten in the way around, it's gotten in the way of innovation. There are things that could happen when organizations can partner together for common good, but the boundary layer is impermeable to the innovation. Mm-hmm. So I think in lots of ways, as schools have had challenges, for example, other places have had solutions, the boundary in between has made it impermissible to have those innovations actually permeate. And I think that's a lesson, those are conversations to be had. What in a time where the rules have to be a little bit different and the rules are based in 100-year-old logic, what is the new logic looking forward? And this digital frontier is one that provides both challenges, equity issues, et cetera, but also provides a vision, some visions on what could be and what needs to be. And that futuristic version is coming closer and closer and closer. It took, a 20-year leap closer to us than before. And I think for us, if we look at going back to a new normal without thinking about our experimentation during this time, we have failed as an organization to not see what could be and how do we help push past those boundaries into a new future state.
Wonderful, thank you. Ash, do you want to?
Yes, finding alternative funding sources is a challenge, but for us, really the biggest challenge is that in Oregon, Southern Oregon, especially Northern California, and I think other places, access to Wi-Fi is very difficult for a lot of people. So when we were doing remote school, a huge challenge for teachers and schools was there's a lot of students who were not able to easily get online, or there might be one computer used for 4 different kids who had 4 different schedules. And so we're working on one way we tried to combat that was by making PDFs available of everything we did, so that schools were able to print copies to give out to families when they came for their free lunch. We're going to continue trying to formalize that process. We're working on developing kits that people can access. So just finding ways to be able to be accessible to everyone, whether they're able to get online or not, has been our #1 challenge and what we're really trying to address moving forward.
I think you brought an excellent point. This is like a huge need. Museums and libraries can offer their best programs. And this is a question that I've asked to many of our partners, who's using it? And most of the time we find out that the museum patrons are using it. But if the museums or libraries' focus has been for the underserved audiences, how are we making that connectivity happen? So again, exploration of hotspots, adding new devices, adding other ways of connecting. I think that's a challenge and a huge opportunity that all of us have to address head on, I guess. Sure. Maria?
Sure. So that is the biggest challenge in rural America, I think. As in my community as well, we don't have everybody in our community has Wi-Fi. Even if they want to get Wi-Fi, the providers aren't able to get it to them. So that has been one of our challenges. One of the things that Laura did was she distributed supplies at one of the Maker Monday events through the food distribution at the school. We couldn't do that every time because it was like 300 kits. So she had to go really simple. But that was a lot of prep and she did it all herself. So that was a huge thing. And she also did something at a recent farmer's market on a Friday. But it's also a challenge for our programming because not everybody that does have access has all the materials at home. So if you want to do a Maker Monday and you want to do popsicle sticks and something else, what if they don't have popsicle sticks? So she's had to be super, super creative on what she offers and what is available at home, because you can't really, people might not tune in if they don't have the supplies. So that has been a challenge. So she's been really creative. She's found ways that people can use upcycled materials. She's tried to adapt it to what might fit their needs at home. So that is one of our biggest challenges, is people being able to participate if they have access, and just the fact that a lot of people don't have a device, they don't have Wi-Fi, is a huge thing in my community.
So in terms of a learning that the library wants to take forward, what would that be?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I'll repeat it. I said, if there's a learning from this, experience, what would you like to sort of take forward? Like, is it like more adaptability?
Yeah, Laura's been really good at trying to adapt. She's come up with a lot of creative ways to collaborate with community partners. She was willing to try and go and help a local school with their summer programming. So she's available, she's committed, but it's just having the time. One person can only do so much.
Yes, absolutely. So we are coming up close to the time. We have one more question, but Jason, want to hear from you, challenge and learning.
I'll go quick. I'm just also going to go a little bit different than everybody else, because we had the same problem with access. We had the same problem with all that. But one of the biggest problems I can see, like, A, Houston is the 4th largest city in this country, and B, it's one of the fastest growing cities. So there was this weird imperfection between like buy-in and too much buy-in. Like sometimes there was people, like it was really hard to get people to convince, like, yes, we can do this. We can give you free science stuff and you can take it and distribute it. And then there was people who was like, yes, but can you give us 25,000 of them in 1 week? And we're like, oh, come on, So I found that really interesting that was happening. Like there was either like too much or too little. And what we had to do is we had to sort of like strike that balance, which we did and made everyone happy. So, And just to say one more thing about the access, one of the things that we did that I thought was a success was knowing that we have a lot of populations that don't have a lot of access to internet. What we did was we just like on the fly came up with this daily fun sheet, and we distributed something like 50,000 of those to people that we know didn't have access to internet. And it was very simple science projects. It was an exercise a day. It was like how to make a board game out of cardboard and things like that. And that was hugely, hugely successful. We just did it all and sent it out. And that's also, to me, one of the things that going forward is a learning thing. Like, we need to keep up the virtual, and we need to keep up this idea of print again. Like, print's okay. Let's print some stuff out and send it away.
So again, wonderful insights, from all of you. And as we are looking into the near future, meaning this fall, we don't know what's going to be happening, with schools, with after schools, with how many audiences will feel comfortable coming into the doors of the museums and libraries. AAM just did a survey which says maybe 1/3 of the museums might actually close down. I'm a person who always sees the glass half full. So learnings from the spring to the fall, there are a lot of learnings, right? And you will be able to, take, if there's a hybrid classroom, if there's a flipped classroom, education is definitely looking at partners like museums and libraries to provide content to keep the students engaged. There's a whole group of homeschoolers parents are looking, for this thing. So please do keep doing the great work that you are doing. Hopefully with the small amount of money, again, small is a relative term, that IMLS will be providing through the IMLS CARES Act grants, this fall, and our FY20 grants announcements, I think from the library side, they were announced today. The museum grants will be announced. So, little by little, some monies, will come into the hands of museums and libraries, and it will help you continue doing, your great work that you're doing. A last rapid fire question. From your perspective, what is the future of making? And let's just take 1 minute each. What is the future of making in your perspective? And we can break the rules, and Sam can go last this time. Maria, why don't you go first?
Sure. In our community, we're thinking that in order to let people be makers is to give them kits to register in advance for like the art program or the Maker Monday. And so they have the supplies at home, and we can, have new topics or new projects.
Okay, wonderful. Ash.
I think the future of making is really strong. We're moving into things like teaching kids about genetics and biomechanics. It really helps support diversity because it helps support innovative thinking. You don't have to have a ton of money. You just have to be creative, look around at the problem you want to solve, and look at the materials you have. And if you don't have what the suggestion is, see how you can adapt what you do have.
Wonderful. Jason?
I say making is going to be fine. One of the coolest things that we did is we had a making project where you just like grab stuff out of your house and make us something. No rules, nothing. And that was huge. I mean, these kids were making things like, gliders and whatnot out of all sorts of stuff. And I think we just have to accept the challenge of change. And that's always the hardest thing for people to accept. Like, it's going to change. We're going to be doing things from distance, and we're going to be doing things virtually. And we just have to be like ready to do that and ready to support that.
I don't know if I have anything to add to what everyone said. I mean, I think this pandemic time is one of affirmation of the hunger for real. And I think it's an affirmation that people value real experiences. When you're stuck doing digital all the time, you're going crazy. So it's an affirmation that the work that everyone here on this call is doing is actually really important. And I think it becomes even more important. But our way of doing it might change, right? This distribution of having access digitally to people all over, having Mama Dean in her 70s, like Zooming, calling where she could barely turn her cell phone on, you know, a few years ago. I think it opens up these different pathways. I think people are experimenting with craft in a way they haven't in a long time because they've had time to be able to not just slow cook, but slow sew, learn how to use tools they've never used before. So I actually am excited. I think people are ready now and to re-engage in things they haven't done in a long time with people that might not be just local, might be distal.
Thank you so much. And I'll just end by saying that, you know, there has been not a similar, you know, pandemic like, you know, recently, but museums and libraries have always offered healing programs in other instances, you know, during other, you know, natural disasters or during other, you know, events. So what you are doing definitely, I think it falls in the broad category of, you know, programs, healing programs. So keep doing that along with the fun, the education. You're offering that, you know, that moment for people to disengage from all the stress and strain, you know, that they are hearing in the news and the media. And the worst thing is the unpredictability, right, of when this is going to end. So keep doing the great work, stay safe, stay healthy, and we really appreciate your time. Let me look, there were questions. There are some questions, but I think all of you, anyone who wants to reach these wonderful panelists, if you go to their websites, I'm sure their numbers, you know, will be listed somewhere, right? We should have provided the email addresses. I apologize that we didn't. We see here. If you can provide your email addresses in the chat box, that would be wonderful. I'm sure you'll not mind being inundated with questions. Because we have identified you as some of the altruistic leaders who are ready to help. So thank you so much again for all the great work and for the Maker movement for, you know, continuing this effort.